The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, casting gentle rays across the breakfast table where the Wales family gathered for what appeared to be an ordinary Tuesday morning. Catherine sat quietly, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching as her youngest son Lewis enthusiastically described his latest Lego creation to his father. William listened intently, his eyes crinkling with genuine amusement as the 5-year-old prince gestured wildly with his small hands. And then, Papa, the castle has a secret door that only the brave knights can find, Lewis exclaimed, his voice filled with the pure excitement that only a child could possess. His older siblings, George and Charlotte, exchanged knowing glances across the table, both secretly charmed by their little brother's imagination despite their attempts to appear more mature. Catherine felt her heart swell as she observed this precious moment. These simple family mornings had become even more treasured since her health challenges earlier in the year. Every shared laugh, every silly story, every mundane conversation felt like a gift she never wanted to take for granted again. The chemotherapy treatments had been difficult, but they had also taught her family the true value of being present with each other. William reached over and gently ruffled Lewis's auburn hair, which caught the morning light in the same way his own had when he was that age. "That sounds like a magnificent castle, little man. Perhaps you can show me this secret door after school today?" Lewis's face lit up with pure joy. "Yes, and maybe we can build an even bigger one together, with towers that reach all the way to the clouds." As Catherine watched this interaction, her mind wandered to the conversation she and William had shared the night before, long after the children had been tucked safely into their beds. They had been sitting in their private sitting room, the weight of an important decision hanging between them like a delicate piece of crystal that neither wanted to accidentally shatter with the wrong words. "We need to tell them soon," William had said softly, his hand finding hers in the comfortable darkness. "The children deserve to know before anyone else does." Catherine had nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words, even as her heart felt heavy with the magnitude of what they were about to share. "Lewis especially," she had whispered back. "He's still so young, but he's also incredibly perceptive. I've noticed him watching me more carefully lately, asking questions about why I've been tired." The decision they faced wasn't one they had taken lightly. After months of careful consideration, consultations with trusted advisors, and deep family discussions, they had arrived at a choice that would significantly impact not just their lives, but the lives of their children and their roles within the monarchy itself. Now, as she watched Lewis animatedly continue his story about brave knights and magical castles, Catherine felt the familiar flutter of nervous energy in her stomach. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that the life he has always known is about a change in ways that even the adults found difficult to fully comprehend? George, now 11 and increasingly aware of the complexities of their public life, had been asking more questions lately about duty, responsibility, and what it meant to serve the country. Charlotte, with her sharp intelligence and caring nature, had been particularly attentive to her mother's well-being, often bringing her small gifts or offering to help with tasks around the house. But Lewis, sweet and innocent Lewis, still saw the world through eyes unclouded by the weight of royal protocol and public expectation. To him, Papa was simply Papa, and Mama was the person who kissed his scraped knees and read him bedtime stories. The complexity of their public roles was still largely abstract to him, which made the conversation they needed to have both easier and infinitely more difficult. William caught Catherine's eye across the table, and she saw her own mixture of determination and apprehension reflected in his gaze. They had agreed that today would be the day. After school, when the children were relaxed and comfortable in their home environment, they would sit down together as a family and share the news that would reshape their future. The decision hadn't come easily. It had grown from a combination of factors. Catherine's health journey had reminded them both of life's fragility and the importance of prioritizing family time. William's increasing involvement in his royal duties had shown them both the intensive demands that lay ahead as they eventually stepped into more senior roles within the monarchy. Most importantly, they had recognized an opportunity to give their children something precious and rare in royal life. A more extended period of relative normalcy before the full weight of their destinies settled upon their shoulders. "Mama, you're being very quiet this morning," Charlotte observed with the keen awareness that Catherine had come to both admire and occasionally find slightly unnerving in her only daughter. "Are you feeling all right?" Catherine smiled warmly at Charlotte, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I'm feeling wonderful, darling. I was just enjoying listening to your brother's stories and thinking about how much I love our family mornings together." Charlotte seemed satisfied with this answer, but Catherine noticed the way her daughter's eyes lingered on her face for just a moment longer than usual. Charlotte had been more observant than ever since Catherine's health challenges, and there was a protective quality in the way she sometimes watched her mother that reminded Catherine powerfully of William at that age. Louis, oblivious to the undercurrents of the adult conversation, had moved on from describing his Lego castle to planning an elaborate game for the garden later that evening. And we can pretend that the big oak tree is actually a dragon, and George could be the prince who has to rescue Charlotte, and Mama and Papa could be the wise king, and Queen who give us magic swords. George groaned dramatically. "Lou, I don't want to play pretend games anymore. Can't we just play football instead?" "But football doesn't have dragons," Lewis pointed out with impeccable 5-year-old logic. "And dragons are much more exciting than football." William laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Well, I think there's room in our evening for both dragons and football, don't you? Perhaps we can slay the dragon first, and then celebrate our victory with a proper match on the lawn." Lewis clapped his hands together in delight, and Catherine felt her heart squeeze with love for this man who could so effortlessly balance being the future king of England with being exactly the kind of father their children needed. He had learned well from his own father's example, but he had also consciously chosen to be more present and emotionally available than previous generations of royal fathers had typically been able to manage. As breakfast continued with its comfortable chaos of school preparation, lost homework searches, and the negotiation of lunch preferences, Catherine found herself memorizing the details. The way Lewis hummed absently while spreading jam on his toast. The way Charlotte automatically helped George find his misplaced football boots. The way William seamlessly managed morning logistics while keeping everyone laughing and relaxed. These moments were about to become even more precious than they already were. The decision they had made would give them more time together as a family, but it would also mean significant changes in their living situation, their daily routines, and their public responsibilities. Catherine knew that explaining these changes to the children would require careful balance between honesty and age-appropriate information. Lewis, in particular, would need extra support in understanding why some aspects of his life would be different. At 5, he was old enough to notice changes, but young enough to be confused by complex explanations about duty, service, and the long-term planning that guided royal life decisions. As the children finished their breakfast and began gathering their school bags, Catherine and William exchanged another meaningful look. Tonight, after homework was completed and dinner was enjoyed, they would gather their 3 precious children and share the news that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their family story. The decision they had reached was one that prioritized their roles as parents while still honoring their commitment to service and duty. It wasn't a choice that everyone would understand, and they knew it would generate significant public interest and discussion. But after months of careful consideration, they were confident it was the right path for their family at this particular moment in their lives. Lewis bounced over to give Catherine his usual enthusiastic morning hug, his small arms wrapping around her neck with the fierce love that only children possess. "I love you, Mama," he whispered against her cheek, the simple words carrying the power to make her eyes well up with unexpected tears. "I love you too, my darling boy," she whispered back, holding him just a moment longer than usual. More than all the stars in the sky. As the family prepared to scatter to their various morning destinations, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built together and excitement about the future they were choosing to create. The conversation ahead would mark the beginning of significant changes, but it would also represent their commitment to putting family first while still honoring their responsibilities to the country and the crown. The morning sun continued to stream through their windows, blessing their home with warmth and light as the Wales family prepared to take the next step in their remarkable journey together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always had, together with love, courage, and an unshakable commitment to each other and to the values that define them as both a family and as servants of the British people. The afternoon quiet of Adelaide Cottage was broken only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant sound of children's voices drifting from the garden. Catherine stood at the kitchen window, watching as Louis chased a butterfly through the flower beds while George and Charlotte worked together to set up goals for their promised football match. The normalcy of the scene felt both precious and poignant, knowing that after tonight, their family's rhythm would begin shifting towards something entirely new. William appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist in the easy way of couples who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger for it. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "I'm just watching our children being children," Catherine replied softly, "and thinking about how brave they've all been this year, how they've handled everything with such grace and maturity." Indeed, the children had shown remarkable resilience throughout Catherine's health journey. George, despite his young age, had stepped up as the protective older brother, taking on small extra responsibilities without being asked. Charlotte had become even more nurturing, often bringing Catherine small treasures from the garden or artwork from school designed to cheer her up. And Louis, with his innocent wisdom, had somehow understood that extra cuddles and silly jokes were exactly what his mother needed during the difficult days. "They get that from you," William said, his voice warm with admiration. "The way you've handled everything this year, the strength you've shown them, the way you've kept our family centered and secure even when everything felt uncertain." Catherine leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his presence as she had countless times over their years together. "We've handled it together," she corrected gently, "and now we're about to give them something wonderful, something most royal children never get to experience." The decision they had reached, after extensive family discussions and consultations with trusted advisors, was both simple and revolutionary in its implications. They had chosen to temporarily step back from some of their most intensive royal duties to focus on providing their children with an extended period of stability and family time before the demands of royal life intensified as the children grew older. This meant they would be relocating to a private residence in the countryside for an extended period, where the children could experience something closer to a normal childhood. William would continue his most essential duties, but would significantly reduce his travel and public engagements. Catherine, having completed her health treatment successfully, would focus on her recovery and on being fully present for this crucial period in their children's development. It wasn't a decision to abandon their royal responsibilities permanently, but rather a strategic choice to prioritize family during a window of time when such prioritization was possible. In a few years, when King Charles was ready to step back further and William's role expanded significantly, such an arrangement wouldn't be feasible. But now, while the children were still young and while Catherine was rebuilding her strength, it represented an opportunity too valuable to pass up. "Do you think Louis will understand?" Catherine asked, voicing the concern that had been weighing most heavily on her mind. George and Charlotte are old enough to grasp the concept of temporary changes and long-term planning, but for Louis, this is going to feel very immediate and very big. William considered this thoughtfully. Throughout their marriage, they had always been partners in parenting decisions, but this conversation would require particular care given Louis's age and personality. He was a bright child, but he was also emotional and sometimes struggled with big changes. "I think if we explain it in terms he can understand, focusing on the adventure and the fun rather than the complexities, he'll be excited, William said. Remember how he talked about castles and adventures this morning? We can frame this as our family's own grand adventure. Through the window, they watched as Lewis discovered a small frog near the garden pond and immediately called for his siblings to come see. George and Charlotte obligingly abandoned their football preparations to examine Lewis's discovery, both of them patient and gentle with their little brother's excitement. "Look at them," Catherine murmured, smiling at the scene. "They're such good siblings to each other. Whatever challenges come with this change, they'll face them together." The sound of car tires on gravel announced the arrival of their private secretary, who would be joining them for a brief meeting before the family conversation. Over the past several months, a small trusted team had been working quietly to arrange the logistics of their temporary relocation and adjusted schedule. The level of planning required for any change in royal routine was extensive, but they had been fortunate to work with people who understood their priorities and supported their decision. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, squeezing Catherine's hand. "I'm nervous," she admitted honestly. "Not about the decision itself, but about making sure we handle the conversation well. I want them to feel secure and excited, not worried or confused." They had spent considerable time planning their approach to this family discussion. They would start by reassuring the children about the constants in their lives, their love for each other, their commitment to education and to service, and their security as a family. Then, they would present the changes as positive opportunities rather than disruptions. Finally, they would give each child space to ask questions and express any concerns. The meeting with their private secretary was brief and focused on final logistics. Security arrangements had been quietly put in place at their new temporary residence. The children's school situations had been discreetly arranged to ensure continuity in their education. Most importantly, the timing had been coordinated to minimize public speculation and media attention during the transition period. As the sun began to set and the children were called in for their evening meal, Catherine felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and anticipation that reminded her of other significant moments in their family's journey. The feeling she'd had before telling the children they were expecting Lewis. The sensation before explaining her health challenges. The emotions surrounding every major transition they had navigated together as a family. But this felt different because this time the change they were announcing was entirely positive. They weren't asking the children to be brave in the face of difficulty. They were offering them a gift of time, stability, and adventure that few families in their position had the opportunity to experience. Lewis bounded into the kitchen with grass stains on his knees and dirt under his fingernails, looking thoroughly pleased with his afternoon of outdoor exploration. "Mama, Papa, I found the most amazing frog. Charlotte says it might be a prince under a magic spell, but George says that's silly because frogs are just frogs." "Well," William said solemnly, lifting Lewis up to wash his hands at the kitchen sink, "I think Charlotte might be onto something. After all, our family knows quite a bit about princes, don't we?" Lewis giggled at this, delighted by his father's willingness to engage with the magical possibilities of afternoon frog discoveries. As always, William's ability to meet his children exactly where they were emotionally never failed to warm Catherine's heart. Dinner was a cheerful affair, with the children sharing stories from their day at school and making plans for the evening's promised dragon football combination game. Catherine and William participated fully in the conversation while privately preparing themselves for the more serious discussion that would follow. As dessert plates were cleared and the children began to settle into the comfortable post-dinner lull that typically preceded evening activities, William caught Catherine's eye across the table. "It was time. Before we head outside for our dragon battle," William began gently, "Mama, and I have something exciting to share with all of you." Immediately, 3 pairs of curious eyes focused on their parents. George straightened in his chair with the attentiveness he was developing as he grew more aware of family responsibilities. Charlotte tilted her head with interest, her intelligence already working to guess what might be coming. Louis simply looked expectant, trusting that whatever his parents had to say would be something good. We've been doing a lot of thinking as a family about what would make everyone happiest and healthiest, Catherine continued, her voice warm and steady. And we've made a decision that we're very excited about. She paused for a moment, looking at each of her children's faces and feeling overwhelmed with love for these three remarkable little people who had already shown such resilience and adaptability in their young lives. "We're going to be taking a special family adventure," William said, his tone conveying both the significance and the joy of what they were about to share. "We're going to spend an extended time living somewhere new, somewhere beautiful and peaceful, where we can have even more time together as a family." The children's reactions were immediate and varied. George's brow furrowed slightly as he processed the implications of what his parents were saying. Charlotte's eyes widened with interest and curiosity. Louis's face lit up with pure excitement. "Like a really long holiday?" Louis asked, bouncing slightly in his chair. "Something like that," Catherine agreed with a smile. "A long, wonderful family time, where Papa won't have to travel as much for work, where we can explore new places together, and where you can have lots of space to play and learn and grow." "But what about school?" Charlotte asked, ever practical. "You'll continue with your education," William assured her. "Everything important will continue, but in a new and exciting way." George, always thoughtful, asked the question Catherine had been expecting. "Is this because of Mama's health?" Catherine reached over to take his hand. "My health is wonderful now, darling. This decision is about giving our family something special while we have the opportunity. It's about choosing to spend extra time together because we love each other and because we can." Louis's enthusiasm was building with each explanation. "Will there be room for dragons at the new place? And frogs? And maybe even more knights and castles?" "There will be room for all sorts of adventures," William promised, his eyes twinkling with amusement at his youngest son's priorities. As the conversation continued, Catherine watched her children's faces carefully, noting their questions, their excitement, and the occasional flicker of uncertainty that crossed their expressions. This was exactly what she had hoped for: engagement, curiosity, and the trust that their parents had made a decision that would benefit the whole family. The foundation had been laid. Now came the beautiful work of building their family's next chapter together. 3 weeks later, Catherine stood in the morning light streaming through the vast windows of Hillcrest Manor, their temporary countryside home, watching Louis race across the sweeping lawns with a freedom she had rarely seen him display before. The Georgian Manor House, nestled in the heart of the Cotswolds, had become their sanctuary, a place where the children could experience childhood without the constant awareness of public scrutiny. The transition had been smoother than Catherine had dared to hope. George had initially worried about missing his friends at school, but the small local school they had chosen had welcomed him warmly, and he was already forming new friendships with children who treated him simply as George, a new boy who happened to be quite good at mathematics and football. The absence of constant security protocols and media attention seemed to have lifted a weight from his shoulders that Catherine hadn't fully realized he had been carrying. Charlotte had embraced the change with characteristic enthusiasm, immediately claiming a tower room as her own private study space, and beginning an extensive exploration of the manor's library. She had discovered a collection of botanical books that had belonged to the house's previous owner, and had started a detailed journal of wildflowers found on the property. Her natural intelligence seemed to flourish even more in this environment where learning could happen organically, driven by curiosity rather than rigid scheduling. But it was Louis's transformation that brought tears to Catherine's eyes nearly every morning. At Adelaide Cottage, despite their efforts to provide normalcy, Louis had always seemed to carry a certain tension, a subconscious awareness that their lives were somehow different from other families. Here, he moved with the easy confidence of a child who felt completely secure in his environment. He had appointed himself the manor's chief explorer and had discovered secret passages, hidden gardens, and What he solemnly assured his family was definitely a dragon's cave beneath the old stone bridge. William appeared beside her at the window, carrying 2 cups of tea and wearing the relaxed expression that had become increasingly common since their move. The lines of stress around his eyes had softened, and he carried himself with the easier posture of a man who was no longer constantly balancing family time against overwhelming professional demands. "He's built himself quite the kingdom out there," William observed, nodding toward Louis, who was now directing an elaborate game involving Charlotte as a captured princess, George as a reluctant knight, and himself as the brave king who would save the day. "Look at all of them," Catherine murmured. "When was the last time we saw them play together like this? No interruptions, no schedule pressures, no awareness of anyone watching or judging or commenting." Indeed, the 3 children had developed a closeness during these weeks that reminded Catherine of her own childhood with her siblings. They had inside jokes and shared adventures. They looked out for each other with the fierce loyalty that comes from having time to truly know each other as people rather than just as family members sharing a busy household. The decision to step back from their most intensive royal duties had not been made lightly, and Catherine knew it had generated considerable discussion in royal circles and among the public. Some questioned whether they were neglecting their responsibilities, while others praised their commitment to family values. But standing here, watching her children thrive in ways she hadn't seen before, Catherine felt certain they had made the right choice. William's reduced schedule meant he was present for breakfast every morning, available for evening stories, and able to participate fully in weekend adventures. He still fulfilled his essential duties, but the constant travel and back-to-back engagements had been significantly reduced. This had allowed him to be the father he had always wanted to be, but had sometimes struggled to prioritize amid the demands of royal life. "I had a call from Papa this morning," William said, referring to King Charles. "He wanted to know how we're all settling in. I think he's somewhat envious of our temporary escape from protocol." Catherine smiled at this. King Charles had been surprisingly supportive of their decision, perhaps because his own experience as a father had taught him the value of present, engaged parenting. He had admitted privately that he sometimes regretted not having more opportunities to simply be with William and Harry when they were young. "Did you tell him about Louis's dragon cave discovery?" Catherine asked. "I did indeed. He asked if Louis might be interested in showing him the cave during his next visit. Apparently, he's quite interested in young Louis's theories about dragon habitats." The sound of children's laughter drew their attention back to the window. Charlotte had apparently been successfully rescued and was now helping Louis construct what appeared to be a fortress from fallen branches and garden stones. George, despite his claims of being too old for such games, was actively participating in the construction project. "You know what I love most about this?" Catherine said thoughtfully. "They're not performing being children. They're just being children. No awareness of cameras or public expectations or the need to always set a perfect example. This had perhaps been the most significant benefit of their temporary relocation. While they had always tried to provide their children with normal experiences, there had always been an underlying current of public awareness in their daily lives. Here, the children could make mistakes, have arguments, get dirty, and be silly without any sense that their behavior reflected on anything larger than themselves. The local community had embraced them with a warmth that respected their privacy while welcoming them genuinely. The children were simply known as the new family at Hillcrest Manor. Louis's teacher at the village school had mentioned to Catherine that he was a delightful addition to the class, creative and kind, without any sense that she was discussing anyone other than a lovely 5-year-old boy. Catherine's own recovery and healing had accelerated in this peaceful environment. The stress of maintaining public composure during her health challenges had been more draining than she had fully realized. Here, she could focus entirely on regaining her strength, spending time with her family, and rediscovering the simple joys that had sometimes been overshadowed by the intensity of royal responsibilities. "I've been thinking about something," William said, settling into the window seat beside Catherine. Lewis asked me yesterday if we could stay here forever. It made me realize how much this experience is giving him something he's never really had before. Catherine nodded, understanding exactly what William meant. Lewis had been born into royal life and had never known anything different. George and Charlotte had some memories of quieter times when they were very young, but Lewis's entire conscious experience had been shaped by the protocols and public attention that surrounded their family. This was his first taste of a different way of being in the world. "What did you tell him?" Catherine asked. "I told him that this was a special time for our family, like a wonderful long holiday, but that we would eventually return to our other home and our other responsibilities. But I also promised him that no matter where we live, our family's love for each other would always be the most important thing." Through the window, they watched as Lewis triumphantly planted a stick topped with leaves as a flag on top of his fortress. The pure joy on his face was something Catherine wanted to remember forever. "He's going to remember this time for the rest of his life," she said softly. "All of them will. These weeks of just being together, of having adventures, of feeling completely secure and free to be themselves. And when the time comes to transition back to our regular duties, they'll have this foundation," William added. "They'll know what it feels like to be a family without the outside pressures, and that will make them stronger when those pressures return." The afternoon passed in the pleasant chaos of family life. There were scraped knees to bandage when Lewis's dragon cave exploration proved more challenging than expected. There was homework to help with when Charlotte struggled with a particularly difficult mathematical concept. There was a football match to referee when George invited several local children over for an impromptu tournament. But through it all, there was a sense of completeness that Catherine treasured. William was present for every small crisis and celebration. She herself felt strong and energetic, fully engaged with her children's daily experiences. Most importantly, all three children radiated the confidence that comes from knowing they're the center of their parents' attention and concern. As evening approached, and the family gathered in the manor's cozy sitting room for their established routine of stories and quiet conversation before bedtime, Lewis climbed into Catherine's lap with the unself-conscious affection of a child who felt completely secure in his world. "Mama," he said seriously, his small hand reaching up to touch her cheek, "I'm glad we came on this adventure. It's even better than the castle in my Lego stories." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I'm so glad too, my darling. It's been the most wonderful adventure." George and Charlotte settled in close, creating the family huddle that had become their evening tradition. William began reading from their current chapter book, his voice warm and animated as he brought the story to life. In this moment, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude for the choice they had made. They had given their children something precious and rare, an extended period of time when they could simply be a family without the weight of duty and public expectation overshadowing their daily experiences. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new discoveries, and new moments of connection. But tonight, Catherine was content to hold her youngest child close, listen to her husband's voice reading stories, and feel the warm presence of all her children safe and happy beside her. This was what they had chosen to prioritize, and every moment confirmed that they had chosen wisely. 6 months had passed since the Wales family's quiet relocation to the countryside, and as Catherine stood in the morning mist of the manor's garden, she could hardly believe the transformation she witnessed in her children. Lewis, now confidently navigating his 6th birthday, had grown not just in height but in self-assurance. He moved through the world with the easy grace of a child who had been given the gift of unhurried childhood, and his natural creativity had flourished in ways that took Catherine's breath away. The boy who had once been somewhat shy in new situations now approached each day as an opportunity for discovery. Just yesterday, he had organized the entire household into an elaborate treasure hunt that culminated in finding the ancient crown jewels he had carefully crafted from flowers, stones, and bits of colored glass. His imagination had been given room to soar, and the results were nothing short of magical. "Mama, look what I made for you," Louis said, appearing at Catherine's side with the quiet stealth that children seemed to master naturally. In his hands, he held a carefully constructed bouquet of wildflowers, grasses, and what appeared to be several small twigs arranged with an artist's eye for color and form. "Oh, Louis," Catherine breathed, accepting the gift with the reverence it deserved. "This is absolutely beautiful. Tell me about each piece." Louis's face lit up with the joy of being asked to share his creative process. "Well, the purple flowers are for how pretty you are, and the white ones are for how kind you are, and these green bits are for how you help everything grow." He paused, considering his creation seriously. "And the little stones are for how strong you are, especially when you were sick, but you got better." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the sophisticated emotional understanding her young son had developed. The time and space they had given him to process her health challenges, to understand his own feelings, and to express himself creatively had resulted in a depth of empathy that amazed her. "This is the most wonderful gift I've ever received," she told him honestly, gathering him into a hug that he returned with enthusiasm before racing off to continue his morning explorations. Through the garden gate, Catherine could see George and Charlotte walking toward the house from their early morning adventure. George had discovered a passion for bird watching during their countryside stay and had convinced Charlotte to join him in pre-breakfast expeditions to observe the local wildlife. Charlotte, always eager to learn, had proven to have an excellent eye for spotting unusual species and had become quite knowledgeable about local ecosystems. "Any exciting discoveries this morning?" Catherine called as they approached. "We saw a red kite," Charlotte announced, her face flushed with excitement and fresh air. "George spotted it first, but I was the one who identified it properly using the field guide." George nodded seriously. "It was magnificent, Mama. The wingspan must have been nearly 2 meters. And Charlotte's identification was completely accurate." The pride in his voice as he praised his sister's accomplishment warmed Catherine's heart. The dynamic between her 3 children had evolved beautifully during their extended time together. Without the pressures of overscheduled days and constant public awareness, they had developed genuine friendships with each other. They collaborated on projects, celebrated each other's successes, and provided comfort during small disappointments with a naturalness that spoke to the security they felt within their family unit. William emerged from the house, carrying a tray of breakfast items, clearly intending to take advantage of the pleasant morning weather for outdoor dining. His transformation during these months had been as remarkable as the children's. The man who had often seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders now moved with relaxed confidence. He was fully present for his family's daily rhythms, while still managing his essential responsibilities with greater efficiency than ever before. "Perfect timing," he said, setting the tray on a garden table they had positioned to take advantage of the morning sun. "I thought we might enjoy breakfast outside, and then perhaps take that expedition to the Roman ruins that Louis has been requesting all week." Louis immediately perked up from his flower-gathering activities. "The ones with the secret underground tunnels? And maybe treasure hidden by ancient knights?" "Well," William said solemnly, "we'll certainly need to investigate thoroughly for any signs of treasure. It's entirely possible that ancient knights did hide valuable items in those ruins." Catherine watched this exchange with deep contentment. William had learned to engage completely with their children's interests and imagination during these months. His natural playfulness, which had sometimes been overshadowed by the serious nature of his public duties, had flourished in this environment where he could be simply a father enjoying his children's company. As they settled around the table for breakfast, Catherine reflected on the decision that had brought them to this moment. There had been challenges, certainly. Adjusting to a different pace of life had required patience from all of them. The children had occasionally missed aspects of their previous routine, and both she and William had needed to find new ways to stay connected to their essential responsibilities. But The benefits had far exceeded any difficulties. Catherine's health had returned to full strength in this peaceful environment. William had discovered a sustainable balance between his duties and his family life that would serve them well when they eventually transitioned back to a more intensive schedule. Most importantly, their children had been given something that no amount of privilege could have provided otherwise: an extended period of simply being children, free from the weight of public expectation and the pressure of constant performance. "I've been thinking about something important," Catherine said as they enjoyed their leisurely breakfast. The children looked up attentively, accustomed to their parents sharing thoughts and decisions as a family unit. "When we first came here, it was meant to be a temporary adventure," she continued. "And while we will eventually return to our other home and our other responsibilities, I want you all to know that the things we've learned here about being together, about making time for each other, about exploring and growing and having adventures, those things will always be part of our family." George, now approaching 12 and increasingly aware of the complexities of their future roles, nodded thoughtfully. "So even when we go back to our regular life, we'll still make time for dragon hunts and treasure expeditions?" "Absolutely," William confirmed. "Some of our favorite traditions from this time will definitely continue, no matter where we're living." Charlotte, ever practical, asked the question Catherine had been expecting: "When will we be returning to our other life?" "We're beginning to think about that transition now," Catherine replied honestly. "Not immediately, but in the coming months. And when we do, it will be because we're ready and because we've received such wonderful gift from this time together." Lewis, who had been listening with the serious expression he wore when processing important information, suddenly brightened. "But we'll always remember about the Dragon Cave and the Roman treasure and the red kite, won't we? Even when we're back in our other house." "Always," Catherine assured him. "And you know what? I think this adventure has made all of us braver and stronger and more creative. Those gifts will help us with whatever comes next." The conversation naturally evolved into planning their day's expedition to the Roman ruins. Lewis's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon all three children were contributing ideas about what they might discover and what supplies they would need for proper archaeological exploration. Watching her family plan their adventure with such joy and anticipation, Catherine felt profound gratitude for the wisdom they had shown in making this temporary change to their lives. They had given their children something irreplaceable: a foundation of family closeness and personal confidence that would serve them throughout their lives, regardless of what challenges or opportunities lay ahead. As they prepared to set off on their expedition, Catherine took a moment to capture the scene in her memory. Lewis racing ahead with his hand-drawn treasure map, Charlotte and George debating the historical significance of Roman settlement patterns, William carrying their adventure supplies while maintaining serious discussions about archaeological methodology with their children. This was what they had chosen when they decided to prioritize family time during this crucial period in their children's development. Not just weeks or months of pleasant experiences, but a fundamental strengthening of their family bonds and a deepening of their children's sense of security and self-worth. The Roman ruins, when they reached them after a pleasant walk through countryside paths, proved to be everything Lewis had hoped for and more. There were indeed underground passages to explore, mysterious stones to examine, and enough authentic historical mystery to fuel imagination for weeks to come. As Catherine watched Lewis carefully examine ancient stones with the serious attention of a dedicated archaeologist, she realized that this child, who had been given the gift of unhurried exploration and family security, would carry those gifts with him always. Whatever role he eventually played in public life, he would do so from a foundation of confidence, creativity, and family love that no amount of protocol or public pressure could shake. The afternoon passed in a blur of discoveries, laughter, and the kind of deep family connection that comes from shared adventure and mutual delight in each other's company. As they walked home in the golden light of early evening, with Lewis riding on William's shoulders and The older children comparing notes about their archaeological findings, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion. They had set out to give their children a gift, and in doing so, they had given themselves something equally precious: the knowledge that family love and presence were the most important foundation they could provide, regardless of what external demands and opportunities shaped their future. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, and eventually, their time at Hillcrest Manor would transition into the next chapter of their family story. But the bonds they had strengthened, the confidence they had nurtured in their children, and the joy they had discovered in simply being together would remain with them always. Standing in the garden as evening settled around them, watching her 3 children plan the next day's adventures with unbounded enthusiasm, Catherine knew with certainty that they had made the right choice. This temporary step away from intensive public duties had given their family everything they had hoped for, and more. The future, whatever it held, would be met by 5 people who knew beyond doubt that their love for each other was the strongest force in their lives, and that knowledge would sustain them through any challenge and enhance any joy that lay ahead.